If you were born a boy in ancient Sparta, your education didn't begin with books. At the age of 7, you were taken from your mother and thrown into a brutal school of pain, hunger, and silence. And when graduation came, not at 15, not at 20, but when they said you were ready, your final test wasn't an essay. It was a kill. A real one. You had to stalk a man through the dark and leave no witness. If you were caught, you failed. If you were seen, you failed. And if you hesitated, you died. So then, you want to know what it was like to be a boy in Sparta. Not a warrior. Not a king. Just a child who barely reached his father's waist. No sword. No books. No protection. They gave you one thing, a place in the dirt. And they told you, survive. This is what you're about to live through. Not the glory. Not the marble statues. But the silence. The cold. The hunger. The boys who vanished. And the thing they made you do, to prove you were worth keeping. You stand at the edge of a dry riverbed, dust beneath your toes, a tunic hanging past your knees. Your father rests his hand on your shoulder. It doesn't tremble. He doesn't speak. No one has spoken since dawn. Across the gap, more children wait. Some are whispering. Some are already hiding their tears. Most stare forward, as if waiting to be chosen for something they don't understand. When the bell sounds, a flat, hollow clang of bronze on wood, your father squeezes your shoulder once. Then he walks away. No goodbye. No glance back. As if he had only delivered grain to a mill. A man in a red cloak appears. He doesn't ask who you are. Doesn't care. He walks down the line and inspects arms, mouths, legs. When he reaches you, he tilts your chin up and studies your eyes. His breath smells of goat milk and iron. He moves on. There are no words of welcome. No explanation. Just silence. And the smell of smoke. At midday, they strip your tunic and hand you a coarse one, gray, short, too thin for the evening chill. Your old one is tossed into a pit. Someone else's tunic lands on top of it. Then another. You are not fed. You are not watered. No one tells you where to sleep. That night you lie in the dirt beside 20 other boys. Some curl into themselves. Some don't lie down at all. The older ones, tall, silent, scarred, walk through the rows, not to comfort, but to observe. A boy to your right coughs. One of the older boys stops beside him, lifts his foot, and drives it into the child's ribs. Once. Twice. Without a word. Then walks on. No one protests. No one even looks surprised. In the days that follow, you learn the only lesson that matters: never show weakness. If your stomach growls, you swallow air. If your knee splits open, you walk anyway. If they strike you, you do not flinch. If you cry, even once, they will make an example of you. Your first food comes when you steal it. A crust of barley bread, left deliberately near the barracks. You hesitate. But hunger is louder than caution. You take it. They were watching. They don't punish you for stealing, only for being caught. 3 older boys beat you with sticks until you can no longer stand. Then they leave you in the dirt. That night, someone takes your tunic. You dig into the earth and cover yourself with dust. Some boys vanish. Some return limping. No one explains anything. You learn to speak without speaking. You count time by bruises. You no longer say your name. And the sky, the same vast Spartan sky, still stretches above you every night. But you are no longer the child who first stood beneath it. The sun is barely up, and already your legs ache. You were kicked awake. There is no morning bell. No call to rise. Just a boot in the spine and a muttered command. Move! You don't know who said it. You didn't see his face. But everyone listens. This is your second morning, and the dust still clings to your arms. You have not washed. There is no basin. You have not relieved yourself, not properly. There is no privacy. The pit behind the wall stinks already, and it will only get worse. You are lined up with the others, maybe 20 of you. Thin, gray-tunic boys with bruised knees and cracked lips. You do not look at one another. You do not ask names. No one told you not to. You just understand. Then he appears. The man in the red cloak. Not tall, not loud, but something in his body makes the lines stiffen. His face is hard to describe. Not cruel. Not kind. Just unreadable. The kind of face that does not blink when children cry. He walks past the line and gestures with 2 fingers. 5 boys step forward. Not the strongest. Just the ones who step faster. He throws one of them a water skin. Another gets a wooden bucket. You. Nothing. He turns to the rest. Follow, he says. You walk down a narrow dirt path that cuts through thorn bushes and snake grass. The boy in front of you is limping. No one helps him. When you reach the pit, it's not water. It's mud, thick and yellow, with a film of green at the top. The boys with buckets scoop first. You're told to wait. Then a wooden ladle is thrown onto the ground. Whoever reaches it first drinks. You don't reach it. But you watch who does. A boy with a scar on his cheek and a torn tunic. His hands are fast. His eyes are slower. He drinks twice. No one stops him. Another boy tries to take the ladle after him, too slowly. The red-cloaked man steps forward and slaps him across the jaw. The sound is dull. Not angry. Just instructional. That boy bleeds, but does not cry. He learns. When the water run is done, you are made to run back. Not walk, run. The ones who lag behind are given extra laps. No one times you. No one encourages you. You run until your vision flickers, then wait to be told to stop. Later that evening, you are made to recite phrases. Not poetry. Not history. Just commands. Obey. Endure. Strike first. You repeat them until your tongue feels dry as the sand you sleep on. No one asks you what you think. But you listen. You watch. There is power in watching. That night, a boy tries to sneak into the food shed. He thinks he's quiet. He's not. You hear the thump of wood on flesh. Then silence. You never see that boy again. In Sparta, some punishments are never explained. They simply erase you. And so, on your second night, you lie still. You do not close your eyes until your body forces you to. And even then, you dream in footsteps. The morning smells like smoke, sweat, and dry reeds. No man in red cloak today. Only 3 older boys standing barefoot in the dirt, arms crossed. Their eyes move like blades. They speak no orders. They don't need to. One of them, with a crooked nose and old bruises on his neck, raises 2 fingers, then points at the line. 2 boys step forward. Your breath catches. Not because it's your turn, but because either boy moves like they want to be there. There are no weapons. No instructions. Just dust and silence. They look at each other. Both waiting. Both hoping the other starts. But Sparta teaches you early. Hope makes you hesitate. And hesitation makes you bleed. The smaller boy swings first. He misses. The other boy tackles him, knee to belly, fist to jaw. It takes seconds. Then it's over. Nobody claps. Nobody sneers. Another 2. The same. Then another. And another. Each pair more brutal than the last. One boy screams when his tooth cracks. Another punches until his own knuckles split. One vomits after getting struck in the gut, collapses forward, and doesn't get up for a full minute. No one helps. No one says his name. A boy with long lashes and quiet eyes lands 2 fast blows, precise, sharp, but when his opponent stumbles, he hesitates. Just a second. Long enough. The older boys notice. One nods. The boy is yanked back, shoved to the ground. Not for losing. For waiting. For weakness disguised as mercy. Then comes a boy you've been watching. Scar on his cheek. Walks like he's already seen things. He finishes his opponent quickly, 3 strikes and a fall. No drama. Just efficiency. But then something happens. He kneels beside the fallen boy. Just for a second. He doesn't speak. Doesn't lift him. Just checks if he's breathing. It's quiet. Then a crack. The sound of foot to chest. An older boy kicks him hard, not out of rage, but to remind him. You're not his mother. The scarred boy doesn't argue. He doesn't cry. He just walks away, slower than before. That evening, he eats alone. The others pretend not to notice. You do. You're not chosen today. But you know your time will come. And so you watch. You watch who hits first. Who flinches. Who keeps their eyes open after the fight. You watch how silence clings to the losers. How no one touches a boy who bleeds. How the older boys remember everything, and say nothing. By nightfall, a space in the row is empty. The boy who vomited never returned. No one speaks his name. No one asks. You begin to understand how Sparta teaches, not with lessons, but with absences. What came next was more of the same. Hunger, bruises, drills, bruises again. Days bled into weeks. Weeks into months. And those who remained, they did not remain unchanged. You don't remember the last time you saw your reflection. You've grown, but not in ways you can measure. You walk faster now. You blink slower. You eat without chewing. Your ribs show. Your hands don't tremble. Not unless it's night. Some boys disappear in silence. Others stay, but you stop noticing them. Their eyes go gray. Their voices disappear. And then one morning, something changes. The red-cloaked man leads you, and the others, away from the main yard. There are only 12 of you now. Once there were 30. You pass the thorn hedges, the boundary stones, the dead olive tree. And then you see it, a ring of packed earth surrounded by stone, like a shallow pit. On one side, a low stone bench. And on that bench, men. Not boys. Not trainers. Men. Their faces are scarred and silent. One is missing an eye. Another wears a bronze chest plate that gleams in the light. They don't smile. They don't speak. You understand what this is before anyone says it. Today, you fight for more than survival. You fight for recognition. The red-cloaked man steps into the pit and raises his arm. Names are called. Pairs step forward. There are no weapons. No shields. No rules. The fights are brutal. Short. Efficient. A boy with a flat nose smashes his opponent's face against the ground. The crowd does not cheer. Another boy loses, then limps off the sand without help. Then more names. And more bruises. You wait. And wait. But your name is not called. You stand motionless, sweat drying on your temples, heart pounding so loud you think they can hear it. And then, a fight begins that changes everything. The scarred boy, the one who used to drink twice, the one who once hesitated to kill, is paired with a silent boy from the valley. The valley boy is fast. Strikes clean. knows where to hit. The scarred boy falls early. Blood drips from his temple. The other boy steps back, assuming the fight is over. But it isn't. The scarred boy lunges forward with a growl, tackles him, drives his head against the stone rim of the pit. Once. Twice. The sound, dull, final. The valley boy doesn't move. Silence. Even the red-cloaked man does not speak. The oldest warrior on the bench stands, walks across the sand, looks down at the body, then at the one still standing, and simply says, "Remember this." Then he turns and leaves. No one claps. No one cries out. The scarred boy remains still, breathing hard, fists clenched, mouth trembling slightly. That evening you don't eat. Not because there's no food, you manage to steal a crust, but because the others look at you differently now. Not with anger, with calculation. You weren't chosen today, but they saw how you watched, how you studied, how you did not flinch when the boy's skull hit stone. You fall asleep in your usual place, but sleep doesn't come. You keep hearing that voice. Remember this. No one tells you when it's your time. There is no signal, no ritual, no whispered warning. Just a silence that falls too suddenly, and a circle scratched into the dust. One boy steps inside. Another is pushed in after him. You. He's older, taller. His nose has been broken before, and he moves like someone who expects to be obeyed. You're half a head shorter and still bleeding from the night before. He doesn't smile. This isn't training. This isn't a game. This is Sparta teaching you the only way it knows how, through pain, through pressure, through choices made in moments you don't understand until they've already passed. You don't remember moving first. But suddenly you're in it, knees in the dirt, fists flying. His knuckles hit your ear. You hear ringing. Your own fists land wild and wrong. He drives you back with a shoulder to your ribs, and for a moment, everything narrows to the sound of your own breath, ragged and panicked. He waits for you to fold. He's seen smaller boys do it. Seen them crawl away. Cry. Beg. You don't. You charge. You don't fight clean. You bite down rage, grab his tunic, ram your forehead into his jaw. There's a crack, maybe bone, maybe something else. He falls. You fall with him. The two of you tumble in the dust, choking, clawing, growling like animals too young to know they're supposed to be men. Then silence. You're on top. He's not moving. You wait. But he doesn't rise. You don't cheer. No one does. Victory here is quiet, not because it's sacred, but because it's expected. You were meant to win. Or you were meant to break. There's no third path. When you rise, your legs shake. Your vision stutters. Blood runs from your lip, and your hand trembles with pain or rage or shame. You can't tell which. You don't even remember how it ended. Only that it did. The boy you beat stands slowly. He doesn't look at you. Doesn't speak. But something in him is different now. He walks away with your mark on him, and leaves a piece of himself behind in you. Later, when the sun has dropped and your bruises are stiff, you sit beside the others in a circle that isn't quite closed. A boy you've never spoken to before tears a strip of meat in half. He gives you the larger piece. He doesn't look at you, but he gives it to you. That night, the fire crackles softer than usual. The voices are lower. Your wounds sting in the heat, and your stomach turns from the meat, but you eat it anyway. Hunger doesn't wait for pride. You feel them watching you, not all at once, not directly. But you feel it. Not fear. Recognition. No one speaks your name. No one needs to. You earned something today. Not respect, not yet. But space. A place in the silence. You lie awake long after the others. Your eyes trace the beams above. You wonder if the boy you beat is asleep, if his jaw still aches, if he hates you. You wonder if he would have done the same. Then your ribs shift, and the pain brings you back. You're still breathing. Still here. And when morning comes, they will look at you differently. Not kindly. Not proudly. But seriously. And that, in Sparta, is how you survive. They told you not to look. Not to care. Not to speak. But one morning, before the drills began, you heard him, a boy coughing in the corner. His skin was pale, damp. His back heaved as if his lungs were drowning in air. You had never spoken to him. You didn't even know his name. He was smaller than you. Always had been. He looked like he wouldn't make it to sunset. You tore off a strip of your bread, crusted and dry, nearly stone, and left it near his hand without a word. You didn't help him up. You didn't call for the trainers. You just gave him something and walked away. Everyone saw. No one said anything. But you felt it. In the drills. In the way they didn't pass you the training spear. In how no one stood beside you during group formation. And that night they came. Not the trainers. The boys. 3 of them. Bare feet. Silent. You woke up too late. One covered your mouth. Another knelt on your legs. The third leaned in close, so close you could feel the heat of his breath on your cheek. You made us look soft, he whispered. They didn't beat you. Not the way you expected. They held you. Pinched. Dug knuckles into your ribs. They knew how to hurt without leaving marks. You didn't scream. You didn't move. And when they left, you didn't sleep. The next morning, the coughing boy was gone. No questions. No mention. Just an empty sleeping mat. You trained with bruised ribs. With sand in the scratches on your hands. You were slower than usual. Sloppier. But the trainers didn't stop you. They watched. They always watched. No one spoke to you for 3 days. You weren't hated. You were distant. An outlier. Something outside the rules. But then, on the 4th day, during water distribution, a boy nudged your cup closer to the stream. He didn't look at you. Didn't speak. Just pushed it forward. Later, another boy switched places with you before a drill that everyone hated. A quiet shift. Nothing more. You were no longer invisible. You were now unpredictable. They didn't know whether you were weak or dangerous. And in Sparta, both could get you killed. That night, you lay staring at the ceiling. You didn't think of the boy who vanished. You thought about what would happen if you did it again. And a strange truth settled in your chest like smoke. Kindness is not weakness. It's something worse. It's unforgettable. They woke you without a sound. No torchlight. No commands. Just a hand on your shoulder in the dark, and the shape of a trainer behind it. The red cloak barely visible. No one else moved. You were the only one being taken. He led you through the camp, past the fires, past the outer circle where dogs were tied and boys whispered in their sleep. Out into the trees. You didn't ask why. Sparta doesn't explain itself. You walked for what felt like hours, though it could have been minutes. Your legs ached from the day before. Your ribs still pulsed. But you didn't speak. Didn't breathe too loudly. The forest felt thick with waiting. Then he stopped. He pointed. You squinted into the black. There, across a narrow ridge, was a small structure, a watch shed made of stone and wood. Low to the ground. A single guard. One torch. One dog. Go there, the trainer whispered. Bring back his knife. You waited for more. A plan. A rule. Something. But he turned and left you. Just like that. Alone. You crouched. Listened. The wind pressed through the trees like breath. The torch flickered. The dog stirred once, then settled. The man leaned against the stone, half asleep. You moved like you weren't yourself. You stopped thinking. Became weightless. One with the dirt. Hands and feet, cold and shaking, found purchase in roots, in moss, in silence. You watched the guard for 10 minutes. Maybe more. And then, you crept closer. Closer. The dog lifted its head. You froze. Your heart beat loud enough to be heard. But the torch crackled, masking it. You didn't run. You waited. Then, when the dog turned away, you moved. Fast. Silent. Your hand reached the stone ledge. His knife sat there, half out of its sheath. You didn't think. Just grabbed it. And rolled. The dog barked. The man shouted. But by then you were gone. You ran until your lungs burned. Until you couldn't hear your own feet. Until the forest became noise and dark and wind. No one followed. When you returned to the edge of camp, the trainer was already there. Waiting. As if he'd never moved. You held out the knife. He said nothing. Just took it. And walked away. You stood there, covered in leaves and sweat and silence, unsure if he'd passed. Unsure what came next. But when you slipped back into the barracks, hours later, and lay among the others, someone shifted to make space beside you. No words. Just a small gesture. The first. At sunrise, no one asked you where you'd been. But everyone knew. They saw the scratches on your arms. The dirt on your cloak. The mark of a knife hilt still pressed into your palm. No one spoke of it. But they looked. Quick glances. Longer silences. You had passed something. And that changed something. The drills felt different. The trainers didn't speak to you more, but they watched you longer. The boys didn't get closer, but they gave you space now. A thin, invisible ring of caution. All except one. His name was Theron. Taller than the rest. Older by at least a year. Broad shoulders. Fewer bruises. He didn't look at you like the others did. He looked at you like he was already imagining how you'd fall. He'd always been first to finish the runs. First to strike in drills. First to laugh when someone bled. Now, he was second. And it showed. You felt it in how he held his spear tighter during training. How he laughed just a little louder when others stumbled. How, during meals, he sat close, but never spoke. Not once. That night, the fire burned low. Boys sharpened sticks. Picked at their feet. Whispered. Theron came and sat across from you. Still nothing. No threats. No insults. No gestures. But you could feel it, like the way dogs circle each other before a fight. You met his eyes. Only for a moment. And he smiled. It wasn't anger. It wasn't friendship. It was something worse. He didn't hate you yet. But he wanted to. Because you were a question. And questions in Sparta didn't last long. You turned your gaze away. Ate your food. Lay down. But even with your eyes closed, you felt his stare. And you knew. Some battles in Sparta weren't declared. They just started. Quietly. They caught him just before the edge of the forest. He was fast, not the fastest, but desperate. 2 boys spotted him slipping past the last cooking fire. One shouted. By the time the trainers arrived, he was already on his knees, panting, arms raised. He hadn't made it 50 steps. No one asked why he ran. They didn't have to. He wasn't weak. He wasn't lazy. He just broke. And in Sparta, there was no word for that. They didn't beat him. Didn't shout. Didn't even bind his hands. They brought him back. At midday, when the sun burned hottest, they stripped him to the waist and made him stand in the center of the training circle, surrounded by 30 silent boys. He wasn't tied. He wasn't restrained. He just stood. For an hour. Maybe more. His knees shook. Flies landed on his lips. He didn't cry, not once. But his eyes were wet from sweat. Or maybe something else. You stood near the edge. Watching. You didn't know his name. But you remembered the way he laughed 2 weeks ago, when someone spilled water and slipped. Now no one laughed. Not at him. Not at all. The trainers said nothing. The boys said nothing. The punishment was silence. But somehow that made it worse. When it ended, he was told to clean the latrines alone. Then sleep behind the barracks, in the dirt. And the next morning, he was gone. No explanation. Just gone. That night, lying on your mat, you stared at the ceiling and wondered what it would feel like to take that first step into the trees. How cold the air would be. How the leaves would sound underfoot. And how far you'd get before the dogs caught your scent. You didn't plan to run. But for the first time, you understood why someone might. That night you dreamed of home. But when you opened your eyes, you couldn't remember what it looked like. The pit had no name. It wasn't part of any map or list. But every boy knew it. It lay just beyond the main yard, carved into the earth like a wound, shallow, dry, ringed with stones. No one trained there. No one spoke of it. Until your name was called. That morning, the trainer didn't shout. He simply looked at you, then tilted his head toward the pit. You stepped forward. No questions. You knew better. The others gathered in a circle, not close, but close enough. Theron stood among them, arms folded, eyes narrowed. You descended into the dust. The air smelled of sweat and stone. You waited. The trainer dropped something beside you, a short wooden rod. Light but thick. Stand still, he said. You did. The second rod came from behind. Another boy, not Theron, not anyone you knew well, was handed it. Hit him, the trainer said. Across the back. The boy hesitated. Again, the trainer added. Harder. The rod struck your skin like a branch snapping. Then again. And again. The crowd didn't cheer. No one laughed. This wasn't entertainment. This was instruction. Pain is not punishment. Pain is clarity. You didn't cry out. But your knees shook. By the seventh blow, your legs gave out. Up, the trainer said. You stood. The blows resumed. Not to break bones, only the will. 12 strikes. Then 15. You stopped counting. At some point, the rod cracked. The trainer handed another to the next boy in line. Then another. Then Theron. He took the rod like it belonged to him. He looked you in the eyes. And swung. It wasn't anger. It wasn't personal. It was duty. Or maybe something darker. Afterward, they left you in the pit. Alone. The sun burned your shoulders. The dirt clung to your blood. You didn't climb out. You didn't cry. You didn't pray. You whispered a name you barely remembered, your own. Just once. To remind yourself you were still there. But it sounded wrong. Like something from another life. They gave you a choice that wasn't a choice. Sparring. One-on-one. No trainers. No whistles. No stop. You were still sore. Still stiff. But you stepped forward when your name was called. You didn't ask who the opponent was. You knew. Theron. He walked into the circle like it belonged to him. The boys made space. Even the trainers stepped back farther than usual. 2 wooden staffs. 2 boys. 1 silence. He didn't smirk this time. Didn't flex. Didn't speak. He just stood there, waiting. You gripped your staff and remembered every bruise on your back. But you didn't feel hate. Just heat. The first strike came fast, his, not yours. A blur toward your ribs. You turned too late. It landed. You staggered. Recovered. Swung low. He blocked it with his thigh, didn't flinch. Swept your feet. You hit the ground hard. The boys leaned in. The air smelled like blood and dust. You stood again. Not taller, but quieter. This time you waited. There struck again, diagonal, high. You let it come. Let it near. Then stepped inside it. The move was reckless. Sloppy. But it worked. Your staff slammed into his shoulder. A real hit. The kind that echoes. He grunted. Eyes flared. But he didn't fall. He came back harder. More swings. More blows. Pain blurred into noise. You fought by instinct. By desperation. Until finally your staff cracked across his ribs. He dropped his. Not fell, just dropped. Raised a hand. The match was done. No one cheered. No one clapped. But they watched you differently now. You walked off slowly. Not because you wanted to, because you had to. Behind you, Theron sat in the dirt. Not defeated, but measuring. That night you didn't sleep. You lay with one eye open. And when you did dream, it wasn't of pain or glory or home. It was of your staff breaking. And you, holding the splinter in your hand like a knife. The boy's name was Dorian. You hadn't spoken much. He slept 2 mats over. Laughed quietly. Listened more than he talked. He wasn't the fastest, or the strongest. But he was kind. Too kind. The trainers said today's challenge was simple. Cross the ravine. A tree had fallen across it. Narrow, slick with rain. Underneath, jagged stone. One by one, the boys walked. Some trembled. Some sprinted. None fell. Then it was Dorian's turn. You watched from the far side. He stepped onto the log. Arms out. Careful. He was halfway when the wind shifted. A branch cracked somewhere nearby. He flinched. And slipped. His body hit the rocks below with a sound you'll never forget. Not a scream. Just a thud. The trainers didn't move. They waited in silence. Then turned to the next boy in line. Training continued. That night, no one spoke his name. No one asked where they took his body. You stared into the fire, fingers clenched. You remembered how Dorian once handed you a scrap of boiled meat when your bowl was empty. Didn't ask for thanks. Didn't smile. Just gave it. Now he was gone. And nothing changed. You looked around. Every face the same. Every motion repeated. No softness. No grief. Just boys. Eating. Preparing. Surviving. You stood up. Left your food untouched. And when you lay down that night, you curled away from the others. As if grief were contagious. You closed your eyes. But you didn't sleep. Because something inside you had shifted. Not cracked, just tilted. Like the log before it broke. It started at dawn. No warning. No names. Just a rope. Each boy was handed one, thick, coarse, longer than a spear. The trainers led you north, beyond the dry hills, into the jagged rise of the foothills where the wind carried ash and the sky turned the color of metal. You walked for hours. No food. No rest. Just the sound of feet on gravel and the breath of those beside you. At the base of a blackened ridge, the trainer stopped. He pointed upward. There, he said. Climb. Tie your rope to the tree at the top. Return before sunset. You looked up. The slope wasn't just steep, it was loose. Ash, stone, and something that smelled faintly of smoke. The tree at the top, if it even was a tree, looked dead. No leaves. Just sharp branches pale as bone. No trail. No help. Just you. And the mountain. You didn't ask why. Sparta doesn't explain. You climbed. Your hands bled early. The stone cut through skin like dry glass. Your feet slipped. The ash filled your nose, your mouth. Once, a rock rolled beneath you and nearly took you down with it. But you kept climbing. Others fell behind. Some stopped. One turned back. The trainer at the base said nothing. Halfway up, the wind picked up. Your rope dragged behind you like a second spine. Heavy. Mocking. But then you reached the tree. It wasn't dead. It wasn't alive. It was burned. Split by lightning, maybe? Or fire. You tied the rope, hands shaking, wrists raw, and began the descent. Coming down was worse. No footing. Gravity fought you. You slipped 3 times. Once badly. By the time you returned, your tunic was torn, and your mouth was full of dust. The sun hadn't set. Not yet. The trainer nodded once, then pointed to the rope. Burn it! You hesitated. You had no flint. No fire. He handed you a small coal in a broken shell. You took it in your bleeding hand, knees shaking, and made fire. The rope caught slowly. Smoke curled upward. You watched it burn. No one spoke. You didn't know why you had to climb, or why you had to burn the proof of it. But as the sun dropped behind the ridge, and the last thread of the rope turned black, you felt lighter. Not proud. Not stronger. Just emptier. And in Sparta, that was the point. They paired you together. You and Theron. No words. No explanation. Just a command. Together. Until morning. Bring back what you find. That was all. Each of you given a small blade. No food. No blanket. Just one sack. You walked into the hills as night fell. The stars were sharp, the wind cruel. He didn't speak. Neither did you. 2 hours in, you heard something. A snort. A grunt. Wild boar. Theron crouched first. You followed. He nodded left. You circled. The animal was big. Too big. You should have turned back. Waited. But he moved. Fast. Silent. You moved too. The sack was meant for meat. Proof. Not for feeding, for survival. Theron struck first. Missed. The boar turned. Charged. You didn't think. You lunged. Your blade hit flesh, not deep enough. The animal screamed. You fell. Theron leapt. This time, he didn't miss. Blood sprayed. The sack filled slowly. You washed your hands in sand. On the way back, he said one thing. You're not weak. You didn't answer. Because that wasn't a compliment. It was a warning. Back at camp, the trainers weighed the sack. Nodded. Approved. You had passed. Together. But something between you had shifted. Not peace. Not trust. Just recognition. The kind men have when they've seen each other bleed. And neither flinched. The next morning, they lit the fires early. Thick smoke rose over the yard. Not for warmth. Not for cooking. For the test. You were led, all of you, into a circle of ash. Bare feet. Bare chests. No weapons. No instructions. Just the smoke. It stung your eyes. Filled your lungs. Made the world small. Then came the command. Stand. Until we call your name. That was all. Time passed strangely in the smoke. You heard coughing. Someone retched. A boy collapsed. Trainers dragged him out by his ankles. You didn't move. Your head pounded. Throat burned. Skin slick with sweat and soot. Still you stood. Beside you, Theron. Silent. Still. At some point, you couldn't feel your fingers. You weren't sure if your eyes were open. But you were there. You kept thinking of Dorian. Of the boy who ran. Of the log, the rope, the cold. And then, nothing. You woke up lying flat, back on stone. A trainer stood over you. You lasted long. That was it. No praise. No reward. Just those words. You sat up slowly. Your hands were black with soot. Your mouth tasted like iron and ash. You looked around. Half the boys were gone. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just fewer bodies. Theron was still there. Not beside you, but near. He didn't look your way. Didn't have to. The silence said enough. You had both stayed standing. And now, there was one less thing between you. There were 12 of you now. You noticed it in the way meals were laid out. Fewer bowls, fewer rags. No one spoke of the missing. They simply weren't called again. One of them was a boy named Lycos. He wasn't the strongest. But he was steady. You'd shared water once, when your throat was torn from dust and no one else offered. That night, the trainers gave a new order. 2 by 2. Carry the stones. Each pair received a bundle of flat, sharp-edged rocks. Heavy enough to bite into the skin. You had to carry them up the hill. And back. Then again. Over and over. All night. There was no finish line. No count. Only until they said stop. You were paired with Lycos. The first few rounds went smooth. You found a rhythm. Lifted in sync. Breathed together. But after the 6th climb, he started to stumble. You slowed. He waved you off. I'm fine, he muttered. He wasn't. By the 9th, his arms trembled. By the 10th, he dropped his side. You picked it up. Carried the full load. They watched. You made it to the top. Alone. At the base, they asked him to try again. He did. Fell halfway. Didn't get up. A trainer walked over. You're done. That was it. Lycos didn't argue. Didn't beg. He just sat down on the dirt, looking at the sky. You waited. Hoped they'd let him stay. They didn't. In the morning, his mat was gone. So was his name. No one filled the space. That day, you carried your own bundle. Both sides. Without a word. And you didn't look up the hill. Because the top felt farther now. The final trial came without warning. A horn at dusk. Sharp. Cold. Final. No trainer shouted. No orders were given. You were told to strip. To kneel. To listen. One trainer stepped forward. Older. Scarred. His voice was like gravel and oil. This is the last path. Walk it, or stay behind. He pointed toward the hills. Dark, jagged. Beyond them, nothing you recognized. 3 days. No food. No fire. No companions. Return with proof. What proof? Someone asked. The trainer didn't answer. You were handed a dull knife, a strip of leather, and nothing else. Then they turned their backs. So you walked. The first night was cold. Colder than any before. You found a hollow between rocks. Slept in shifts, 20 minutes at a time. Every sound a threat. Every breath shallow. Hunger set in by noon the next day. You searched for anything, berries, roots, even insects. You found little. On the second night, your fingers went numb. You wrapped them in grass. It didn't help. Your mind started slipping. You thought you saw a fire. A bull. Your mother's voice. You reached for it and grabbed air. The third morning, you woke to blood on your knuckles. Not from a fight, from the rocks you'd clawed in your sleep. And then you found it. The carcass. A small animal. Rabbit, maybe, caught in a thorn trap left by someone long gone. You didn't thank the gods. You didn't think. You just took the bone, wrapped it in your leather, and turned back. When you returned to camp, there were only 6 of you. The others had not come back, or had returned empty. You dropped the bone at the trainer's feet. He looked at it, then at you, then said, "Ago gens at the bones." You didn't know if it was a metaphor, or a fact, but it felt true, because after that walk, you weren't hungry anymore, just hollow, and ready. They did not dress you in armor. There were no laurels, no speeches, just a line. 6 boys, standing shoulder to shoulder beneath the gray dawn. The city was quiet. No crowds. Only a few elders watching from behind stone pillars. A single red cloak was draped across your shoulders. Heavy. Warm. Wrong. You didn't feel triumphant. You felt older. Not in years, but in weight. The head trainer approached. He didn't smile. Didn't look proud. He simply placed a bronze disc in your palm. No words. No explanation. You weren't told what it meant. You had passed. That was enough. Theron stood beside you. He looked thinner, more bone than boy. But his eyes were calm. You'd bled together. Stood and smoked together. Returned from the hills together. Now you stood as equals. Not friends. Never friends. But something like brothers. A boy across from you began to cry. Not loud. Just one silent line down a dirt-streaked cheek. No one stopped him. No one mocked. Because they understood. This wasn't celebration. This wasn't victory. It was the end of being a child. And the beginning of something far colder. When the ceremony ended, you were no longer part of the Agoge. You were Spartan. Whatever that meant now. They gave you a day to leave. Not to rest. Not to rejoice. Just leave. No one told you where to go. There was no assignment. No barracks waiting. You were free. And that was the strangest part. You walked alone that evening. Not far, just beyond the ridge where you first saw the pit. The dirt still remembered the shape of your knees. The stones, the sweat. The names you couldn't say aloud anymore. You sat there. Let the wind touch your face. The cloak pulled at your throat. Not tight, but enough to remind you it was there. You looked back at the camp. The yard where you learned to bleed. The wall where Dorian once stood in silence. The shadow of the tree where Lycos dropped his stone. You thought of Theron. Of the night with the boar. Of the smoke. Of his silence. You hadn't spoken since the ceremony. And maybe that was right. You were different now. Not better. Not worse. Just harder. Sharper around the edges. And when you finally stood, your knees didn't shake. Not because they were strong, but because they no longer remembered how to be soft. You walked back toward the road that led out. Didn't turn around. Didn't wave. Didn't speak. But somewhere, in a place deeper than thought, you whispered goodbye. And now? Now you are a man. That's what they say. They look at your shoulders. The way you don't flinch at cold. The way your eyes hold still. They say you are Spartan. But sometimes, late, when the fires burn low, you remember. Not the pain. Not the drills. Not even the ones who didn't return. You remember the smell of olive soap. The soft press of your mother's hand on your scalp. The warmth of sleep without fear. You were 7. And you didn't know yet what it meant to stand still while someone screamed. You didn't know the weight of a friend's silence. Or how cold it gets after the last bruise fades. They gave you a red cloak. But no map back to yourself. And now, when boys arrive, trembling, quiet, wide-eyed, you watch them from behind the pillars. As you were once watched. And you wonder if they will forget the sound of their own names. If they too will burn their ropes. If they will come back with bones in their hands and emptiness behind their eyes. And if one night, when they lie alone under the stars, they'll whisper something soft. Something no one else will hear. Something like, I was 7 once. And I was still mine. Then you'll sleep. Not because you're at peace. Not because it's over. But because in Sparta, there is no room for remembering.